Can you guys hear me and see me just fine?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. My apologies for the technical issues here.
All right, everyone, we are live. We do have 37 participants in the room right now with us. And so thank you all for joining us. I'm glad we're all here. And I am going to get us started. Are we ready?
Let's do it.
All right. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the President's Council Real Talk. We can't let up. My name is Erica Penick, and I am the Executive Director of the President's Council. Today, in a candid discussion focused on what we as Black business leaders and influencers are doing and need to do to raise the bar exponentially higher and identifying actions that will create change in a social and political climate of systemized institutional racial oppression, inequality, exclusion, are Kevin Clayton, Vice President, Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement for the Cleveland Cavaliers, Brian Hall, Senior Vice President, Executive Director, Greater Cleveland Partnership, Equity and Inclusion, Colin Jackson, Director of Minority Engagement at the Republican Party of Cuyahoga County, Frank Wiley, Anchor, WEWS News Channel 5, and Evan Valentine, PC President's Council Scholar. Frank, I'll turn it over to you at this time.
All right. Thanks so much, guys. And I appreciate your patience through these technical issues that occasionally tend to plague us when we need our computers most. Ultimately, the message today is we can't let up. We cannot release statements and sound bites that sound good today, yet fail to identify actions that will create change. We must raise the bar exponentially higher and do what is right, even when it is unpopular or you stand alone. All of you have decided to join us in this conversation because you feel extremely passionate about these subject matters. And I want to begin today by asking each of you, how are you doing? Colin, I'll start with you. How are you doing? How are you holding up in these trying times?
You know, Frank, it seems like only a few months ago we were all sitting in the barbershop and we were talking about coming together to do something, talking to the community and expressing some of our views. That was pre-COVID-19, and if COVID-19 didn't pull at your heartstrings when it comes to our community, I don't know what would have. But then we had 6 weeks of unjustified killings of people who look a lot like me and you. So I think my overall feeling was I was tired. I was tired. And I think that weariness has carried on through the last 2 weeks of civil unrest. And now at this point, I'm ready to do something. So when I got the email from Erica here, I was very excited to participate. So I think I went from uneasy to worn out to now where we are now, being motivated, and excited to see all of your faces here today.
Emotions run the gamut, huh?
Every time.
Every time. Evan, PC Scholar, thank you so much for joining us. How are you holding up? How are you doing?
I'm okay. I'd like to harp on what Colin said. I am motivated. I'm currently in the process of planning a protest march. I'm in Ypsilanti, Michigan. So we are currently in the process of planning a march through the city of Ypsilanti and Ann Arbor to protest the injustice that has been going on. I've been very upset about it, and I feel like it's been, since I graduated high school, all the way up until now, it's just been a consistent barrage of just unjust killings.
And Kevin, how are you doing?
Yeah. Hey, Frank. Glad to join you this evening. So I've been on the same roller coaster as a lot of other people. And if you had asked me a week ago that question, I actually would have said optimistic by how many other people other than African Americans, other demographic groups were joining us in this journey. And then I started asking the question, Frank, as to why people were excited. Why are white folks now apologizing? And I'm sure every person of color has been getting the, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. So as I started asking the question, I really had a low, Frank, because I realized that people were really galvanized around police brutality and not racism?
Mm.
Two totally different questions. So I'm at a point now where, you know, it's like, okay, what do we do to make sure that the real change is around racism, not necessarily one of the systemic issues in our society?
That's heavy. That's heavy, and that's a load that we carry every single day. Those same questions. Brian, how are you doing?
Frank, I'm doing okay tonight. Glad to be with you and Colin and Evan and Kevin and Erica. Blessed to be here still. So first of all, I'm doing okay, but you know, I share all the emotions that everyone else described. And I think it was a week ago, Sunday, I was actually ready to throw my hands up. Like, you know, I work in diversity and inclusion. You know, we got passion towards this. You got some allies and soldiers. You think you got some things going forward. And I don't know what it was. I think it was the culmination of COVID, of everything else that was happening. And I got a email from a colleague, and it was Langston Hughes' poem, Freedom's Plow. And it made me proud and made me think, you know, what we're going through now is nothing compared to what other folks have gone through in our history. And put your hands back on the plow. So I told the person who sent it to me, I said, I was thinking about another poet, Marvin Gaye, who said, make me want to holler and throw up both of my hands. That's where I was. I got my hands and put them back on the plow. So that's how I'm feeling today. And I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged that, you know, we got an opportunity. To Kevin's point, you know, I think we're all cautious about what this opportunity might mean, but we're also, you know, soldiers in the struggle for equity, and we got our hands on the plow. So another day to fight.
Wow, and now that song is in my head. That song is in my head. Yes, Erica, we talk all the time, and I have some semblance of your feelings in my mind right now because of our conversations prior to this particular moment. But for the folks out there listening, how are you doing? Because you are also fighting a battle, which we shared on my 5 o'clock show a few days ago, where the helper needs some help. And when we are impacted exponentially. We're not impacted like, well, quite frankly, like white business owners and such. It just doesn't work the same. So how are you doing?
I am frustrated, but I'm also energized. And I think about my grandmother. She used to tell me all the time, I can show you better than I can tell you. So that's what I'm right now. I'm done talking about it, and it's time to do something.
Done talking, and I've heard that phrase several times over. And friends, I want to go ahead and jump right in because we said that we wanted to keep it real tonight. And I don't think that anybody else would expect anything less than us keeping it real, Erica. That jumping off point, you are tired of talking. Conversations must happen in order for us to move this ball forward. But you want to see some action in there. What are some of those items that you would like to see there at the top of your priority list? And how do we get there?
For me, I'll speak first. We know that there are a wide range of disparities across many spectrums, from health to education to wealth. But one of my greatest frustrations, as you mentioned, is when you look at corporations and when you look at large gifting foundations, there is a large disparity when you take a look at their large gifts. So if you look at the corporations and foundations that are giving the greatest dollar amounts, they are giving those to majority corporations who themselves are not led by people of color, but use people of color to carry out the work for which they're funded. So why don't we fund and support those organizations that are led by and mission to support these underestimated populations, these underrepresented populations, and give them the opportunity to do the work? There are my frustration also lies in corporations that don't have representation in their C-suites. There is too much of putting Black faces in places to give the appearance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but not real listening and empowerment in those positions.
So it's more of a veneer.
Yes.
And so people often misunderstand. They see, you know, they see a picture and they see the roster and they see that maybe it's half white, half Black. That's diverse. But the portion that you're alluding to is the inclusion. You want your voice to be heard and your ideas to be embraced.
I've said it before, we don't want to be at the table for the appearance of inclusion. We want to actually have the opportunity to have power and influence in those situations, not just for the title of we have this percentage of Black representation or brown representation on our board. We want to have actual opportunities and influence and power to make decisions that impact our communities.
Erica said, "Don't invite us to the table. You better let us eat, right?" We want to participate in every facet available. And Colin, that brings me to you, Director of Minority Engagement at the Republican Party of Cuyahoga County. What do you make of that conversation that we just started with Erica there and the inclusion piece of it?
Yeah, so I mean, this moment more than any other things, like everything else, has been telling us a lot about the people that we consider allies, the institutions that we have in our community, and what they really mean. So within this moment, I think about three things that I don't want to happen. I don't want our community to become apathetic. I don't want us to wait 2 weeks and then stop caring about these things. I don't want our community to be pacified. And I think that's what Erica is speaking to when we have people at the table who do not have influence. And I think that my last fear is that we won't persevere. And the perseverance part is where we decide, well, we're not coming to your table anymore. We're going to build our own table. Mm-hmm. So for me, that was the most important thing tonight about sitting down with the President's Council, because I see you all and this organization and the network you have as building your own table of influence. So we are not asking someone else to let us have our own voice in an issue that is our own. So I think that, you know, I've spoken about this with my significant other many times over the last week. I don't put too much weight in the money that these major corporations are putting into quote unquote Black issues. I see that as pacification at best. And what we really need to be doing is figuring out what we can do to lead the efforts, because, you know, we can only have so much of the dinner if we're at somebody else's table. So that's how I feel about that issue. You know, they're going to pacify us. You know, they got to make us comfortable, but we can't settle for that, and we need to push for more.
We can't expect everything if we come to somebody else's table. We can't put our feet up on the coffee table and.
Nah, I'm not gonna let you do that. I'm not gonna let you do that. So we got to build our own. We have people to do it, and that's the most important part.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what does that process look like, Colin? I mean, give me the first step or two of how one is supposed to even pursue such a goal, because, you know, it's more than a notion.
Yeah. And believe me, we are battling 400 to 500 years of systematic oppression that's keeping us back from building that table. So let's be very clear about that. But I think the most important thing that we do is, just like Mr. Hall knows from working in his corporate environment, when you're having a meeting, when you have a goal, you set an agenda. And the first thing we need to do as a community is set a clear agenda. What do we want and how we want to get there? Now, if we want to focus on police brutality first, let's do that. And everyone needs to find their lane and find a way to fit into the agenda. Again, one of my biggest fears right now is that we cannot even all agree on what the agenda is supposed to be. Are we supposed to attack police unions? Are we supposed to defund the police altogether? Do we want to fight across partisan lines and say, hey, we'll just go with this guy. The most, ideally, as the African-American community, as the minority community, we are going to whoever wants to be in charge with our own agenda. But Frank, again, that starts with getting our own agenda and all get on one consensus. I think one thing that, again, I was watching Sullivan with my significant other last night, and we were talking about how Dr. Martin Luther King had SNCC, all the Southern Leadership Baptist organizations all on one page. They were all working towards one agenda. If we can't all get on one agenda, we'll never be able to build a table.
We can't all agree on the same meal. That's going to take some work, right? Brian, you said you quoted the late great Marvin Gaye, and you've been in this fight for a minute now. And
yeah, watch it.
Well, no. I mean, this is a cruel companion, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yep.
And it has been following you every step of the way, and you can't shake it. It does not matter. You don't get any days off, whereas some of our colleagues, quite frankly, who are not Black, they may say the weekend is here. I'm going to unwind. I'm going to unplug, I should say, and recharge. We don't have that luxury. How do you recharge? How do you do that? Because you said it makes you want to holler, throw up both your hands. What do you do to continue to move through this battle?
Well, as I also said, Frank, what we're moving through today is difficult, no doubt about it. But our ancestors moved through much tougher than this. And that's what the poem said to me about keeping your hand on the plow, lynching. We've got police brutality, and believe me, it is a curse on our society right now that I'm so proud to see people standing up for. But comparatively, and I'm not trying to minimize it, comparatively, what our ancestors went through, you couldn't look a certain way, you couldn't say a certain thing, and it was legal, absolutely legal for all the things that happened. So that's part of it. Part of it is, as tough as it might be, it's not as tough as it was. So that's number one. Number two, I think, there's something Colin said about getting on one agenda. I agree with you, Colin, and I also would add to that, because when I look at the United Way of Cleveland, they've got a bunch of agendas. When I look at the business community, let's just take private equity, for instance. How many private equity firms are in Cleveland with different segments and different agendas? So somehow we have to allow for the vision to be big and bold and forward thinking, and have places under that vision where people can do their thing and we support each other, versus the challenge of always, we get caught in the challenge of trying to figure out what the challenge is and get wore out at that. And I think that's part of what has been taught to us as a culture. So we can't move until we're all on the same page. Martin had his group, Malcolm had his group. The Panthers had their group.
Yeah.
They were not together, but they wanted the same thing in many ways. And I think we have to, so I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think we have to think of it in a way that agenda is a broad agenda. And what happens to us, because there's going to be some corporate money, there will be some philanthropic money, there's going to be a big check, and we're going to all say, but we need to do this. And by the time we get done, it's like spreading peanut butter on a piece of bread, and it'll be really thin in some corners. Mm-hmm. But so I agree with you there. Let's try to focus it, but let's also not allow ourselves to be put in a single box. There's many boxes that we need to check. And it goes from social justice to healthcare to education, economic justice. And in each one of those categories, there's 10 categories underneath it.
Yeah,
and we have the willingness, the intelligence, the courage, back to your original question of the stick-to-itness. We weren't born on third and thought we hit a home run. We barely got up to the plate. So the fact that we're even in the game swinging, we understand. So I'll stop there so I don't take up more time than I should.
No, it's all great insight. And Kevin, that brings me to you, because you said police brutality versus all forms of racism. This is not something that is centered around the piece of video that was seen of George Floyd out of Minneapolis. People are protesting because of a multitude of reasons. Perhaps it's their own run-in with a bad police stop, or their own run-in with being followed around the mall, or the pay discrepancies that exist. They're not just protesting, not to minimize what happened in Minneapolis by any means, but they're not solely protesting because of what happened in that incident. What do you do with those apologies that you made mention of moments ago there, Kevin? How did you accept that? How did you receive that? Did you accept it? Or what was going through your mind when you were blitzed with apologies?
Yeah, so Frank, let me add a little context first, and then I'm going to answer that very specific question. So as my organization, which obviously has a big footprint here in Cleveland and nationally by representing the Cleveland Cavaliers, as we were processing this with our team members, we have 500 team members, and a number of our white team members were coming to all of our African American team members through a open town hall meeting that I hosted, and it was, hey, I didn't know, I apologize. And on the surface, we all took that as we as people of color are we actually extend the olive leaf first. We extend the olive branch, and it's like, oh, no worries or what have you. However, I then asked the question, what are you apologizing for? Why are you apologizing? Mm-hmm. And instead of assuming that we knew, and what we found out at that point was people were going back to, I don't know what I'm apologizing for, I just feel bad, all the way to, you're my friend and I see how much pain you're in, or when I saw what happened was horrific. So nobody on this call, nobody on this panel would say that this is obviously the first time that we have seen this. But one thing that came out loud and clear through someone who said, I have kids, and when I saw actually, Charles Floyd being killed, when I saw that, it reminded me of my children. What would I do if one of my children were killed like that? So for me, it was that white folks began to see in real time a reality show, not necessarily something that they saw on the news. To see the life being taken out of a human being was absolutely horrific. So people now were internalizing that. So then when we started processing the question around, okay, now that we know why you feel that way, the question then came up around, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do to help in the movement? And I really appreciate what Colin said around strategy. One of the things, just from a background standpoint, I had the privilege of working with Dr. Bernice King at the King Center, actually before coming back home to Cleveland, and really understanding what nonviolence meant. It's a strategy. And to the point that's been made, you see all the protesters all over the country. They're all protesting for different reasons. To have a nonviolent approach, to have a protest that says we're in protest of something is the key. We need to take this energy and drive it towards multiple common goals. To Brian's point, you can have different objectives, but the one objective has to be economic empowerment for the Black community. And the only way we get there, and history has shown us that, is that we leverage the Black dollar to drive the change that we need. And if you look at all the protests over a period of time, let it be the Montgomery boycott and others, it all came through us driving an economic agenda. And then all the other systems that we know that are disparate are going to be able to sit on top of that. So that's, to me, kind of what we do with the apologies. We turn the apologies into action.
We mentioned your involvement with the Cavaliers, and ultimately what I grab from that is we must all be running the same play. It sounds simple. It sounds simple. Oh, it sounds simple. But how do we begin to get that conversation going with the masses? How do we make sure that we are all on the same page? Who is the person, or who are the people designated to bring that to the table, Kevin? How does that work?
Yeah, so Frank, I love what you said. Let me add one other piece. I think is we all need to be playing the same game, not necessarily the same plane. Here's what I mean by that. The game that's being played is, and what you hear is all about the police brutality and injustice there. Well, the other hat that I get to wear is chair of an organization called Community Health Charities, and we've been focusing on the disparities from a health standpoint, which we would have had this conversation about COVID, and it would have been just as impactful because we would have identified the different disparate opportunities or different disparate impacts of people of color versus non-people of color. So with that being said, how we get there is from a strategic standpoint. That's one of the things, and I'll just give you a couple of key things for the Cavs, which will give real, very specific examples, if I can share specifics out of that. So one of the things that we now built in are accountabilities into not just my group, which is the diversity inclusion group, but across all of our senior leadership team, having accountabilities for the agenda. Secondly, the agenda is diversity and inclusion, but we are focusing right now on the Black agenda in Cleveland. And you are going to see within the next few weeks that we will be purposeful and non-apologetic around all for one, which is kind of the Cavs stand. And our tagline to that is all for Black. And what that means is if we aren't purposeful, if we are driving the Black agenda through our supplier diversity program, if we aren't driving the agenda through making sure that we are promoting Black restaurants. So when we have Tuesday Restaurant Week, that we aren't that we are making sure we identify African-American restaurants. So we're focusing now on driving the economic agenda through our organization. And you'll see some other things coming back through our kind of social media plan. But to be clear, it's about driving economic empowerment, which we think our brand is capable of doing. And we're bringing the Browns and Indians along with us.
Over time, have you seen an obvious shift among your colleagues?
I would say yes. So we started this about a year or so ago, actually several years ago, but me coming back to Cleveland for the last year, we've been able to really have people understand how everybody wins with the D&I agenda. And there has been a significant shift because they've seen how our fan base has responded as well. So yes, we've seen the shift.
Evan, from a student standpoint, what do you make of all of this? This is a lot to take in right now. And, you know, quite frankly, as we've all discussed, many people don't exactly know what to do with all the energy they have right now. What do you make of all of this?
From a perspective of me, I just recently graduated. So I've been trying to figure out what I could do. I've been feeling, because I mean, we have been trapped inside for so long, and then just to finally have things slowly open up. And then this all come at us at once. It's very difficult. So a majority of the time since it started, I've been trying to figure out what to do. And the conclusion that I came on is to try and speak up, to try and organize as a community, specifically with people that I know that are Black from my school that I just graduated from, so that we can speak up as a whole and actually try and make a change, which is what I'm trying to do with the protest, which is so.
I understand. Congratulations to you, by the way. Do you feel like you have a hard time getting folks to listen?
I feel like it's very hard for people to be on the same page. There's a lot of misinformation as far as social media, because a lot of people connect through social media that are my age, and nobody understands what exactly is going on.
Wow.
So maybe in some instances, maybe some of our friends are not, they don't have as much life experiences, and so they need a little help in terms of understanding the bigger picture, but they see what's going on with the obvious, with the marches and what have you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Erica, what can folks like Evan do? What can they do to galvanize their peers? What can they do to help educate them? Because some of this is, well, we have to do the work ourselves. We have to seek the knowledge ourselves. What can Evan's peers do, I should say?
They need to get engaged. and where there is a lack of information, reach out to others. A lot of what I learned was not from history books. I sat around the table with Reverend Dr. Fred Shuttlesworth on a regular basis. I sat with my grandmother. I sat with my aunts who were civil rights activists, who were in church bombings, and I heard firsthand what was going on. And so I think the millennial generation really needs to open their ears to learn the history firsthand, and then be receiving of that information and get engaged. We want to make certain that if there are opportunities for them to participate and lend their voice, because these young people know how to mobilize, they know how to activate, and we need to learn that from them. But then to utilize us collaboratively to make a change. I do want to say that outside of what young people need to do, we as business leaders and in the corporate sector, the corporate needs to step up. They need to step up by having representation in their C-suites. They need to step up by having representation on their boards. We can no longer, as people, accept these scraps as revolutionary progress. We have to hold each other and ourselves accountable for what we say and what we do today. And that's what I want to take away from this conversation today. I don't want it to be just another opportunity of us talking at each other or talking heads. I want us to walk away with actionable items that we come back together and say 3 to 6 months from now, a year from now, what have we done? Not what have we talked about doing, but what have we actually done, and hold each other to that. And that is the only way that we are going to make change. Even when it is detrimental to our individual bottom lines, we have to speak up for what is right in that moment. And that's what I want to take away from today.
I posed the question to some of my colleagues, what are you willing to give up? Namely some of my white colleagues scattered across the country, because when you talk about the scraps, Erica, I recall pushing a story about Black women equal pay day, in which Black women only earn 61 cents on the dollar. And so we talk about how that not only sets us back paycheck to paycheck, month to month, but for retirement. And it doesn't garner one the opportunity to earn generational wealth. What do we need to do in the workplaces? How can we become more open about salaries? How can we rid ourselves of this problem if it's so taboo when we're talking about salaries?
I'll just say that most people on this panel know me. That's not an issue that I face in terms of being, I'm open, I'm transparent in what I say and what I do. With me, what you see is what you get.
Mm-hmm.
I have conversations with people all the time that are just very honest and true. It's not about a title, it's not about a position. It's about being able to pull back the layers of who you are and just being real with each other. And that is why I have been able to move forward and navigate this system. If we are so afraid to talk about it and be honest with each other, no matter what the situation is, we're never going to move forward. Everyone is so hung up on their title, their position, their bottom line. But we have got to move in one unified voice and sacrifice sometimes your own self-interest for the greater good of the whole.
Yeah, Brian, that brings me to the question I wanted to ask you, as you could expound on what Erica said, because so many people have come to me and said, Frank, well, to paraphrase, they more or less said, we need to make sure this message is palatable to white folks. We don't want to make them uncomfortable. My question in return is, what if you had to deal with the discomfort of these systemic issues every single day?
Right.
Did you consider that? That is a level of discomfort that we should be discussing. Do not center yourself in this discussion. We need to figure out what you can do to help, what you can do to be an ally, what you can do to walk alongside folks who are struggling in this regard. To that, you say,
I say a couple of things. One, we are doing work. You just heard what Kevin said. You heard what Colin said. You heard a young man who just graduated college and he's trying to figure out. You hear what Erica said. So we are doing work. And I don't think we should pat ourselves on the back, but I think we have to stop beating each other up. Let's look at what we're doing. Where can I help you and where can you help me? So last week, or earlier this week, our board at the Greater Cleveland Partnership voted along with 70 other organizations to support racism as a public health crisis. And to the point Kevin was making about apologizing, in some ways it's an apology vote. In some ways, it's symbolic. The quick thing that we have to do for every one of those organizations, including my own, is to say, and what are you going to do? Because to put our names up on something is one thing, but to take an action is another thing. And I penned an article this week for the business community. And I started the article with, anyone who has kids has played hide and go seek. And as soon as you opened your eyes, you looked around and your little child was right there where you could see them. They were behind a curtain or a chair. They thought they were hidden, but you could see them plain as day. Mm-hmm. But you pretended not to see them so the game could go on. And that's what our friends that say, I'm sorry, that they're apologizing for. That's what our organizations who are making big statements. This has not been hidden. Someone said we got almost 500 years. I mean, the civil rights movement wasn't hidden. Lynching wasn't hidden. Enmity. I mean, this is not any reveal. So stop with the I'm sorry or the symbolic, and let's start with the what. And so for my organization, I'm building the 5 things you could do.
Right. Please.
5 things that you can do as an organization, as a business community, 5 things that you can do. That's for their community. And one of them is assess yourself from your boardroom to your maintenance department. Take a hard look. There's tools. We have a tool. There's tools out there. Look at your organization from the boardroom to the maintenance department, and then make a commitment to change one of those things. I saw your colleagues nationally stand up in a newsroom, right, about what was going on in the media. Stand up and demand change. So the things that Erica is saying very passionately, we all are doing things. I mean, Colin's position at the Republican Party, people went out and said, let's help make this happen. And he knows that, and we're proud of him. We're proud that he's there, whether we're Republican or Democrat, because they don't ask you that when they're oppressing us. What's your party? Oh, you in that party, you okay then. It's the same for Black people. So we need to be in both parties, and we need to be making our voices known in both parties. So I'm just taking a little bit of different tack of, I don't like to spend a lot of time on what we're not doing. I want to support what we are doing, and let's amplify it. Let's figure it out. Let's do more of it. Kevin and I are good friends, talking 7:30 tomorrow morning about 3 things he said he got to talk to me about and how I can support him. And he's done the same for me. Erica, all the time. Colin, anytime you want, call. And same with you, Evan. I think that's where we find synergy and start. Of course you can.
Oh,
absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely. But that's I just think we gotta.
Yeah, no doubt.
We get in these critical times and we start trying to figure out, what we're not doing.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And
We're
Colin,
doing a lot.
No, we are. And what do you make of that, Colin? And some of the steps that one must take, because it's going to take more than folks hopping on Amazon and reading a book or two. It's going to take some practical experience. People are going to have to roll up their sleeves because that's comfortable when you're sitting at home reading a book. You're not having to get into the mess, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it was said here, this is a perfect segue. You definitely do this for a living. This was a perfect segue to what I was about to say. I heard it said a moment ago, what are you willing to give up? And for our white colleagues and our majority colleagues, what they have to give up is their comfortability. And this is what I've had to even talk within my own party about. You're going to have to say Black Lives Matter. You're going to have to say systemic racism. You're going to have to say something to the problem. And if you do not do that, your silence is deadly. So that's what they're going to have to give up. Where are we going to have to give up? We're going to have to give up maybe going to some of these institutions that don't support our causes, that don't support who we are. We're going to have to start circulating that $1.3 trillion within ourselves. And that's really where, again, I am not one for asking anyone. My father said this to me today. You do not ask someone who has oppressed you to take the chains off. You don't do it. You don't do it. It just doesn't make any sense. And even though that's not everyone in our society, that is some of them. And for us, if we could start spending our $1.3 trillion supporting each other, like Mr. Hall's talking about on this call right here, us working with Kevin, us working with Evan, us working closer with Erica, now we can use these funds.
And Frank, don't forget Frank.
I'm sorry, Frank. Yeah, I forgot the TV guy. Yeah, because you're amazing. But if we can start using these funds to then have influence, again, like Mr. Hall is saying, on both sides of the aisle, then we can start making some real changes. It's not just enough for us to have our community members and people that look like us listening to us. We need to figure out how we get influence on people that don't look like us. And Mr. Clayton made a really good point. And one of my friends at the company is called Black Dollars Matter. Because if Black lives don't matter to people, one thing that's always going to matter to people, always, is this Black dollar. And if we can use that, that's our biggest weapon. And once we unite on, at least on that agenda, we can really make some changes. So that's how we kind of get started on that. But it all starts with us being a little bit uncomfortable with you not spending your dollar in a certain place. And again, with our allies saying, okay, I'm willing to be uncomfortable with you, Colin, if it's worth the community moving forward.
Colin, by and large, what's that conversation like for you and the folks that you constantly cross paths with when you try to convince them that this is the way to go? What is that like for them if they're not exactly culturally competent to, you know, some of these issues that we're talking about?
You know, I won't tell you who said it. But I had a conversation with someone that I hold at a very high regard in my professional work. And he said to me, Colin, I don't know how to say this. I'm like, well, what are you trying to say? He's like, well, I'm not Black, Colin. So how do I explain that I also care about this issue, but I don't want to offend anybody by saying I understand? And what I told him was that you need to say that I don't have the same experience. I never could. And I want to learn as much as possible and be as much as an ally as I can. It can't be but, because when it's but, it makes it seem like your experience is lesser than mine. But when it's and, that's where we're able to actually build some bridges. That's where I can convince you to be uncomfortable and to say some things that may not be along with what you're typically around saying. Now, don't get me wrong, Frank. We all know this about the world. There are going to be some people that you just can't work with. Listen, I went to school in Kentucky. I learned about it real quick down there. I think we talked about this before, that there's just certain people who we never going to get through. We're never going to get through to. But I will say within the Republican Party of Cuyahoga County, especially, I can't tell you about Columbus. I can't tell you about any other place. I can't really even tell you about D.C. sometimes. But for us at the Cuyahoga County Republican Party, we had our windows broken during the upheaval for George Floyd last week. Do you know what they wrote on our windows, Frank?
Tell me.
You should have listened sooner. They wrote, you should have listened sooner.
How did that message resonate?
it resonates real good when a brick comes through your window. I'll tell you that that now they're saying, Colin, what should we be doing? What can we do more? Who can we call? So I'll share some information with you all. I'm in contact with Speaker Householder down at the State House, Senator Portman, and numerous Republicans, elected officials, about how we go about that, not just in the state, but on a federal level, and pushing them to the table that they are, again, just scared to talk about because they don't know how to do it the right way. But they're willing to talk about it, but they just need a little bit of help. And that's important. That's why our allies are as important within our community as they are outside of our community.
You said something about we need folks who don't look like us on this panel to join the fight, right? And I want to start with you, Colin, and then we'll slide to you, Evan. And, I kind of want everyone to jump in on this because this is obvious. You guys have seen the coverage on the news. Clearly, the complexion of the crowd, Colin, out there protesting, it's a bit of a mosaic. Your thoughts?
I think it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful to see people come together, similar to how it happened during the Civil Rights Movement. The only thing that worries me is that it doesn't become someone's pet project. It doesn't become something they do on the weekend to make them feel good and they run back to their suburbs. Because, like you said, Frank, some of them can go to the protest and then go home. Some people can go to work with these issues and then go home every weekend. We don't have that luxury. So if you're really in this with us, I appreciate you. But more importantly for me, I want those same people at that rally to be organizing. I want them to be registering to vote. I want them to say, hey, there's 4,000 people out here at this protest. Let's pick 12 of them and run for city council. Let's pick 2 of them and say, you're going to be our new district attorney. Let's pick 3 of them and say, we're going to be our judges. If we can do that type of empowerment combined with the economic empowerment Mr. Clayton is talking about, our white allies will be even that much more helpful to us because they can help us along in that process.
Evan, what do you make of the crowds out there? It's a little bit of everyone out there.
I've been diverse crowds. I went to a protest last week and it was, in my opinion, it was predominantly white, given the area that we are in. But in regards to having people that don't look like us on this panel, I feel like it's very important. And as far as it goes, it should span farther than just this. It can't just be while it's relevant, while it's still happening on camera, while it's being filmed, because sure, it's important now, but after everything takes back over and the world resumes back to normal, it can be forgotten. And I feel like it's very important that we can't just let it die, regardless. Because it still matters. It's not just it's being filmed. It has to be, because there's different levels to racism, like systematic and various different levels. So
Absolutely. And Kevin, you see this on the streets. You see a wide array of people out there. Unfortunately, in instances where things boil over, then the whole crowd gets conflated. It's one group causing a problem, according to some folks, and that's not the case. As we've spoken with people out in the crowd, my colleagues have done that and done a great job of it. But when you see that crowd, what are your thoughts?
So Frank, I was in that crowd. Both last 2 weekends, I've been in 2 different protests, and startling different. So I was downtown Cleveland the first weekend with a number of my Cavs colleagues, and started off peaceful, as we all have seen that, and then it exploded. And I'm up close personal watching it, walking past people breaking out windows. And it started with a different group of people who weren't there early on for the first 2 hours. And that different group of people predominantly were young white males that were throwing objects from behind the crowd so they could camouflage themselves. So on one hand, I'm feeling the pride of our community coming together, black, tall, short, gay, straight, whomever, actually protesting and watching all of this energy, but you could feel the pain, you could feel the despair, you could feel the frustration. So that was last weekend. I live in Avon. I've had some situations out here this weekend in Avon. And for those of you who are looking and don't on the call and don't necessarily live in Cleveland, Avon is about 95.9% white. I went to an Avon protest, And it was predominantly white kids who would put this protest together. They had the same level of energy, but they didn't, what was missing, and actually you saw the weekend shift from really more peaceful protests all across the country, but they had the same energy and the same excitement around hope. And I'm watching these young white kids say enough is enough, and I want to support my black brothers and sisters. And I've never really seen that many white folks hold up a sign talking about Black Lives Matter and saying it. So I've seen the energy shift, but to the point that everybody is saying, if we don't capitalize on this energy in this moment of time, it won't be sustainable over a period of time. So I keep going back to, what are we going to do to have it sustainable? And the last thing that I'll share, and this is the term that I use, and as Brian said, that we've done some things together. I open this up for anybody watching this, is that professional sports has a way into any door in this country. And I always talk about what I do as a Trojan horse. A Trojan horse is kind of the big, kind of sexy, powerful image that walks in the door. But then when you get in the door, you open up, and all these community organizations can come behind us and come through it. So I want to throw out the fact that the Cavaliers are wanting to be that Trojan horse in the community and lock arms with other organizations so that we can, if it's our brand that walks in the door first, we absolutely are willing to do that.
The NBA has taken a bit of a different stance than some of the other professional sports leagues, namely the NFL, with the commissioner recently coming out and saying, I don't have the direct quote in front of me, but they made a mistake. Okay, but the NBA, for some time, we can see the work that has gone into it, because for some time, LeBron and all the rest of his friends across the league have been very outspoken, whether it's the I Can't Breathe shirts, but it was more than just a t-shirt that they were wearing. They were speaking during interviews. They may not have taken a question about missing a shot on that corner three, but they said, what I want to talk about is this right here, because while I may have left this particular neighborhood, I still have friends and loved ones who are still in that neighborhood and who are enduring some of these issues. And as we have seen with LeBron and the incident with his garage, I believe, out in Los Angeles, it seems no one is immune from this.
Right.
What advice would you offer to other professional sports leagues who have been a bit slow to come to the table, so to speak?
Yeah. So Frank, what the league has done, what our league has done, is that we have understood our market. We've also understood our workforce. Our workforce is predominantly African American, meaning the players, and also from the coach's standpoint. So when you understand who your workforce is, you understand kind of the culture of your marketplace, you build your sport and the culture of your organization around that. So freedom of expression is part of our culture. It's part of is part of our fan base. So all we have done is said that freedom of speech, freedom of expression is what we want, because if you also think about it from the perspective of just what's different in the NBA is that fans kind of feel they know our players up close and personal. There's no, we don't hold back on tweets. We don't hold back on social media. People say whatever they want to say. Other sports don't. Yes, right. And all of our organization is free to say what we want to say. So with that, if you understand your market, understand your workforce, then you can be on the same page, have the same game plan as we talked earlier, and other leagues haven't done that. There's been a censorship in the NFL. You haven't heard anything from Major League Baseball, nothing, and or hockey or any other sport. So we take pride in leading culture change, and I'm excited about some of the things that are about to happen today. We had a Board of Governors call. The agenda was, what are we doing to make sustainable impact, and how are we going to leverage our brand across all major cities where our sports teams are? And I'm not talking about statements and putting up banners. You will see a lot of sustainable change, because as a league, we understand that we can lead communities to change around this issue, because the communities know us to do that already.
We we speak about the dollars, right? And so many people are concerned about that. That's understandable. I think the thing that the NBA has been able to show is that it has increased, would you not agree, in popularity? I don't have the numbers in front of me, but you guys have increased in popularity, and players have increased their personal brand simply because they have taken a stance and they did not ride the fence.
Right, absolutely. So the NBA is the second most popular sport next to the NFL. But if you look at individuals and how they have been able to increase their net worth and their wealth, again, that freedom to be expressive and that freedom to be themselves. So that is something in which we drive as far as individual development, individual wealth, individual brands in the marketplace. And that's just a staple of what the league is.
You're saying it's safe over here. You can, it's okay.
Right.
It's okay. I want to encourage folks out there who are listening to pose your questions, because we want to definitely try and get to them and have you join the conversation. So feel free to do that. You know, Brian, I want to ask you this because
we do have a question from the audience.
Question, whereabouts?
Kalita Sims, I'm going to unmute your microphone if you could ask your question.
Perfect.
You're still muted, Kalita. You're going to have to unmute.
Hi, Kalita, can you hear us? Are you there with us, Kalita? You'll have to unmute your mic. It's all good, because I had my own technical issues a few moments ago. Kalita, if you can unmute your mic there, we can definitely slide your question. Are you there? There you are. How you doing?
Nice.
Go ahead.
Hi there. Go ahead. Hit us with your question.
Certainly. What would you say is going to be the biggest challenge? I know that there's been conversation about everyone being on the same agenda, and I understand that we need to have different types of agendas. But how do we overcome that challenge? Can everyone maybe speak on that in terms of how we overcome those challenges in terms of working together, having set agendas, so that way we can address these issues that have been discussed tonight?
That's a great question. It is a great question. We have the ultimate answer, but how do we get there? How do we start that process? You know, Evan, I want to hear what you have to say first. What are your thoughts on that?
As far as getting on one agenda,
Yes, sir.
I'm speaking from experience as far as putting together, because I have been putting this together, getting different people from different backgrounds to speak on the issue and figure out exactly how do you feel about the topic at hand. Because it's one thing to feel like you're a part of a movement, but it's another thing to actually know why you're a part of that movement, and us coming together to figure out exactly what we need as a community to push that agenda once we get it together. As well as holding each other accountable to that, so we can all be on one page.
Accountability, absolutely. Colin, your thoughts on this? We want to get some answers there for Kalita.
Yeah.
How do we get there?
I'm gonna get the answer for it. For me, I think this is the thing with our community. I've seen that I was on a call with pastors and I was on a call with community members, and they came to the same answer. We have to all become uncomfortable with this not having our name on it. As a community, it doesn't matter if it's Brian Hall's name on it.
Who cares who gets the credit?
Yeah, who gets the credit? Because I think that's where, and it's for a reason where systemically they put that in our community where, well, who's the closest one to the mass? I don't want to use plantation reference, but who's the big one in charge? And I think in order to get on one agenda, we need to be very comfortable with saying, I'm not in charge, I'm just here to help. And if we can all do that, one agenda should come very easily.
Okay. And Brian?
I think I answered this question earlier when we talked about the agenda. I think it's many agendas. I think we have to be comfortable knowing that there's people in the business community who are advancing entrepreneurship, maybe acquisitions, who are advancing supplier diversity, who are advancing bigger and better retail shops, who are advancing Buy Black, and not feel like because they're advancing something a little bit different than what I might be advancing, that either A, we have to work together. If we do, that's cool. But if we don't, can I applaud you? Can I say, man, the Real Black Friday is great. I love what you're doing.
There you go. There you
I
go.
love what you're doing, and make it better. Who can I call to help support you? We don't. That's what I'm saying. We spend too much time trying to figure out how to make everybody on one page versus let everybody's page be strong, going towards the same agenda. So I won't repeat what I said earlier, but I just think, you know, as I said, it doesn't happen like that in other communities. They don't have to all have one agenda. How many organizations, how many not-for-profits are there in Cleveland?
Yeah.
That don't look like us? How many organizations are supported under the United Way banner that do hunger, that do job training, that do drug counseling, that do any number of things? But when it comes to Black people, somehow we let them trick us into thinking we got to get one big paintbrush and I want to paint this stripe and all of you guys be in there, and ladies. And the same as which is what Erica was saying about funding. We got some money we want to give, but you all got to work together to do this one thing. Well, no, we all need $1 million, not $1 million split amongst 100 organizations. So I have a little bit different view of that, but as Colin said, my name doesn't have to be on it. I can applaud what he's doing and figure out how to help him.
That part right there.
Frank, can I add a piece to this?
Please.
Because I think part of the disconnect when I referenced around kind of getting on the same agenda, I didn't add enough context. So I think every one of our organizations, every organization has an economic agenda. There's not, if it's the education system, there's economics to that. If it's from an employment standpoint, there's economics to that. So my point of all that is saying that economics is going to drive decision making. It's not going to be around emotional responses. It's going to be, okay, what are the economics that are affecting that? That's why, from that perspective, if you think about systemic racism, that crosses every system in which runs this country. For example, the housing system. We have an issue with the housing system as far as people of color are disproportionately affected by that. Education system, 40% of African American males drop out before they graduate from high school. Wealth, 27.4% of African Americans live in poverty versus 9% white. Justice system, 6 times the rate of whites as far as who's incarcerated. So I could go on and on around systemic racism. My point is, right now the conversation is about law enforcement. So therefore, as everybody is getting behind law enforcement, there's all these other systems that are broken that actually feed into the system of law enforcement, incarceration, and these others. So I'm saying we just need to understand what our agenda is collectively. It doesn't have to be one agenda, but it does. There is a common thread that runs through all of these. The other thing that I will share, and it's me coming back to Cleveland, I'm trying to understand where is the leadership for kind of the African American community. I'm not talking about one person. And who are the leaders? What groups of people are working together to put the multiple systems on the table for us to address? And that's something that I think would be very helpful. Other communities you see, okay, well, look, here's the agenda as it relates to here's the 3, 4, 5, or 6 things we're going to work on. But they work together, to Brian's point.
Erica, your thoughts on this whole process, because you among many things that you do out here in the community, you are organizing and leading people to where they need to go. Ultimately, what do you think it's going to take to get to Khalidah's question? How do we do that? How do we make that happen? You kind of alluded to this earlier, but I'm not sure if she was able to hear some of that conversation moments ago.
I think to Brian and Colin's point, it has to be, we can't be selfish. We have to do it with great selflessness. Even times when we are standing alone and speaking in a lone voice in a crowd of white, when we are that person that is at the table who is representing the mass of us.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that it is not one specific agenda, because Danielle Sittner and the NAACP are doing a great job at mobilizing people and demonstrating our unrest. And that's one half of the puzzle. But then there's the other half of the puzzle, which is us, the corporate community. And those two pieces of the puzzle make us one whole in the movement. And picking up the phone, responding to emails, being responsive to one another, that really is essential in making us be able to work together. When I sent out the email and I called each of these people, they responded immediately. And that speaks volumes. If I can't even get you to return my phone call or answer my email, then how are we going to work together?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Frank, I wanted to.
Yeah, no, go for it, please.
You were about to, as you were going around the question on, I think, white allies or the crowds and the folks that are out there.
Yes.
I just wanted to make a couple points. Number one, I was struggling about a week ago with a statement that came out from an organization in town, a white CEO, not-for-profit organization, and it was, "We are for George Floyd." And I was proud and I was struggling. I couldn't figure out why was I struggling with this statement.
Something didn't feel right.
I talked to a friend and she sent me a quote, and it said, "If you came here to help me, don't waste my time. But if you came here because your liberation is inextricably tied up with mine, let's work together." So when I see the people who I believe now are starting to recognize that their liberty is tied up in our liberty, then we have allies. Mm-hmm. But too often we get the people who say, "You know, I got to do something. I'm gonna go help." And they come in and they think they're bringing something to the table, and their heart is probably good at it. But they haven't acknowledged, and I think you were saying some of this, Kevin, about why are you apologizing? They haven't acknowledged that, you know, our Pledge of Allegiance says, "with liberty and justice for all." And so that means if we don't have liberty and justice, then there's a problem with our country. And that should be a problem with them. It's not just a problem for us, it's a problem for everybody. And so when I see the crowds today that look like they look, and the people who were in Avon holding up the signs, people in Shaker who were holding up signs, I'm starting to feel cautiously optimistic that people are recognizing their liberty is tied up with ours. And that makes a big difference. And just two other points, Kevin, this is a sports one. Cal Corver wrote that piece on white privilege 2 years ago. Amazing. And that's what he said. He said, "I was looking at my teammates when something happened, wondering what they did to cause it to happen. Until I finally realized that was me with my privilege." And he pledged that he was no longer going to have that privilege. And my last point is, I got an email from Poland last week.
Okay.
CEO I met at a conference in South Africa. He said, "I see what's going on. I do business in the United States. I don't have any employees there, but I want to be supportive. I want to say something, and I don't want to say the wrong thing," as Colin said earlier. And I said, "Well, Poland, you would understand equality. You would understand justice. You would understand freedom. You were a communist country at one time. So speak from your heart about freedom, about justice, and about equality, and you will be on our side. And that's what I think, and that's why I wanted to come back to that point, because I think we're starting to have allies that we haven't had in the past. They were coming to help us, but not to be liberated. And if we can help them be liberated by us being liberated, I think that's where we should be going.
As you say that, I just get a push alert from the New York Times, saying Cops is done. The long-running show, which has been accused of glorifying the police, canceled nationwide protest. I saw something similar in my hometown of Tulsa, Oklahoma, with Live PD. And you know the history there with Tulsa just a few days ago marked 99 years. And
Yes, we do.
Yeah, and to your point there, Brian, of how we're all connected. Dr. King said in so many words, in a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. I can never be what I ought to be until you become what you ought to become, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
There's a question from someone here. Jasmine Long wanted me to pose this to you, but we were in a good discussion there, and so I didn't want to break up that energy. But she said, I'd like Brian to speak about what the city declaring racism a public health crisis means in his mind. So what does that mean in your mind there, Brian?
I won't take up too much time because I've spoken a lot, but Jasmine, hello, and how are you? Thank you for the question. To me, I think it's a recognition and an important recognition that we are putting racism at the forefront. If you go back to my analogy about playing hide and go seek with your kids, maybe the game's going to stop. Maybe we're going to stop pretending we don't see it. But it is on all of us and our allies to now take this very symbolic statement and turn it into the actions that create change. We also are pushing statewide for this to happen. Colin, you mentioned householder. There's a bill that's being considered. There's testimony that happened today, and it's going to be a tougher battle to get this through the state. But
can you expound on that a bit?
So the state is considering whether to also name racism a public health crisis, declare it a public health crisis, and they are taking testimony on a bill. But you know, our state has many rural representatives where they don't see their liberty inextricably tied up with ours. The point that I was making, the point that you made about Dr. King. And if they don't see that, then it's okay. They see this as something different. So, you know, Colin knows the numbers downstate better than any of us. And so it's a difficult battle. It will be much more difficult. I will say Franklin County, did approve it about 2 weeks ago. And that was encouraging for Franklin County to declare racism a health crisis.
And that's part of my responsibility to show folks how it impacts the entire community, being a news anchor and also reporting on some of these systemic issues. Well, frankly, all of the systemic issues that I can talk about. Erica has been such a huge help in connecting me with resources through the President's Council. But there are people, I see the emails, I receive the voice messages of folks saying, I never thought about it like that, or I never really had to look at it like this. And I think the latter part is what really resonates with me. The honesty of people saying, I never really had to look at it like that.
Right.
And Colin, you shake your head in agreement there. Because you see this firsthand as well.
Yes, I do. Previous to what happened at our headquarters, we were talking about the issue, but we didn't come out in any type of statement. And at least at the Republican Party of Cuyahoga County. So, you know, I was hurt by the destruction of our property. I hurt for our city having to have, you know, those physical things being torn down. But also I'm a Black man at the end of the day, so I was hurting for our community. But I think this situation more than anything else is bringing that to the people who didn't have to think about it anymore to their front door, and they're having to make a decision, which is very positive. And you know, I just want to speak to Mr. Hall's point about what's going on in Columbus and what our elected officials throughout the state are going to do. This is again where I bring up this point, and I was at a panel of the President's Council a couple months ago, and I said, in order to really shake the table, you have to have hands on both sides of it.
Well, how do you hold them accountable? How do you hold them accountable, Colin? How do you make sure that they are doing what they said?
And but that becomes you know, when you have your vote and when you have your dollars. You can take your dollars away from them and you can give them to them. You can give them votes, you can take away from votes. Those are the only things when it comes to politicians that they're really paying attention to. Your protests are great, but if you don't go out and vote, it doesn't matter to them. You know, and they're only, and a lot of them, you know, depending on what kind of influence you have, if you're not putting something behind them, you can't really call them. So in a situation like we're dealing with in the State House, that's why we're going to Speaker Householder. We're saying, Speaker Householder, make this an issue for your people that follow you. And if we can do that, we can make something very positive happen.
What Phil?
Questions from the audience, Frank.
I'm sorry?
We have a couple of questions from the audience.
Oh, yeah, go. Yeah.
At Montree's question, and I pose it there to you, Colin, Montree Rucker Adams. Hello there, Montree, asking how we ensure the ball is not dropped. And that's why I asked you, how do we hold their feet to the fire there, Colin? And you gave us a great answer on that. What do you make of that, Kevin? How do we make sure the ball is not dropped, as we kind of allude to sports there a lot through this conversation? How do we make sure that all these sports organizations, all these sports leagues are doing their part? I mean, because it's impossible to not see what's going on, and it's been that way for a long time.
Yep. So Frank, a couple of things. I talked about accountability before, and I'll just give examples of what that might look like. And I got to tell you, on one hand, I'm proud of what our organization is doing. However, on the other hand, from a sports standpoint, it's a damn shame. And here's what I mean. There's 147 sports teams across the NHL, NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, and soccer. 147. Just a simple question. It's not a trick question. How many diversity and inclusion officers do you think there are across 147 teams?
Well, I know we have at least one.
7.
There's 3.
Among all 147.
147 teams. There's only 3 of me that exist. Now, there are individuals that have HR, diversity, procurement, all in one title. But as far as a independent, specific design, D&I department and team, there's only 3. All 3 are in the NBA. It's
No, 3.
Dallas and Cleveland. Yeah,
3.
3. So that's why I said it's a damn shame, because for us, we recognize it and understand it, but we've also looked at it and defined it as what I said earlier. We look, and I'm talking about all professional sports, have said, well, look who's on the court, look who's on the field. We have diversity. No, what we have is representation of people of color on the court and on the field. It's not systemic diversity throughout the organization. Now in Cleveland, with the Cavaliers, there's only 2 NBA teams that have a black general manager and a black coach. And that's us for one. And with that, if you think about pro sports teams, there's only one city in the country of all sports teams that have a black general manager for both or either 2 of the 3 major sports. That's the Browns and the Cavaliers. We have black general managers. No other city has that level of representation. So when you look at, for us, you're talking about how do we hold each other accountable? Somebody before talked about kind of representation and who's hired and who's in positions of power. That has to be across the league. And one of the things that we are pushing from the inside out is that all of our teams in the NBA have a chief diversity officer. That would be huge. So that's one. Secondly, for us, we tie our work around diversity, inclusion, and equity to performance, which ties that into bonus. And also this coming year, it'll be tied into compensation. And I'm not talking about counting how many people of color we have in different positions. That is an HR function. I'm talking about how many of our marketing nights have we dedicated to communities of color? How many of our assets on the supplier diversity side are we dedicating to communities of color? As we engage with, from a marketing spend standpoint, how many marketing organizations are of color that we're working with? So there's a way to metric, you hear me keep going back to the economics, because that's what drives our organization at the end of the day. So accountability, making sure people are in positions of color, and then publicizing those results, of which the NBA does do that. We publicize what our results are.
NBA cares.
There you go. Yep. Hey, Frank, let me add just one last piece and there was a comment that was asked. I want to add to it what Brian said, if I can put my health hat on. The importance of declaring racism as a health crisis also plays out into the fact that there's funding that comes with that. When there is a health crisis, then municipalities have to rally around that. So that's why what was said earlier, and I think, Colin, you may have said it if you look across the state, or maybe it was Brian, that you have rural communities, I guess it was Brian, rural communities and urban, and because funding's attached to that, that's why there's some resistance. The other thing is, from a foundation standpoint, that health foundations will, if racism's a health crisis, they can then defer money and shift money towards racism. Whereas before, if it was a social crisis, if my whole agenda and mission is on health initiatives, I can't shift any money to that area. That is a huge, huge change. And we're the only city, county, state in the country to even have this up for that kind of level of discussion.
It's going to force a lot of people to interrogate themselves for some honest answers.
Oh, yeah.
We have a hand raised from Thomas. Thomas, did you want to ask your question?
Hey, Thomas, holler at us.
You have to unmute yourself.
Oh, man.
Thomas?
Are you with us, Thomas? We want to know what you have to say there.
We'll go on to Carl Singleton. Carl, did you want to unmute yourself?
Hey, Carl.
Can you unmute her? Can you unmute America? There you go.
He's got it.
This is Carl. Can you hear me?
Yes, we have you.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, this is a great conversation. I just wanted to add in, I just wanted to see if anyone needs any rides anywhere anytime soon, or if any of the organizations involved may know anyone that needs some rides.
Why, do you have a transportation company or something?
I do. Foundation Transportation. And yeah, I just wanted to see if possible, the gentleman from the NBA with the Cavs and diversity and inclusion. I'm just trying to see how I can be introduced and get Foundation Transportation, rolling with the Cavs.
I'll make the introduction, Carl, no problem.
Okay, excellent.
No problem. And I think Kevin might already be a little bit aware of you because we did the boardroom to boardroom. He couldn't participate in that one, but he may have gotten the invitation as well. So happy to make the introduction.
Okay, excellent.
And Carl, I want to say hello. It's been a while since we've actually talked. I think I was maybe 16 or 17 the last time we met.
Yes, sweet 16 birthday.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. But I do want to say that, this moment right here is important because we talk about the economic empowerment and supporting people who are going to support our issues. And I think the better question to you, Carl, while we're going to be sending you business is, are you going to support Black causes and making sure that good policy is in place around all these issues that we're talking about? And I'm going to assume your answer is yes. And if that's the answer, we should definitely all be supporting Carl.
Absolutely. That's, we've been a member of the President's Council, for years. And, Erica has been in our back pocket, you know what I mean, since this whole COVID thing is, and even before then. We found our accountant through the President's Council. I met Mr. Stokes through the President's Council. So a lot of where we are today is because of the people that I'm on the phone with right now. So absolutely, we're completely down for the cause. We will do sponsors, some rides. We will do whatever we need to do, to get through it together.
Yeah, we had Channel 5 on you there.
Yes, I know. I know. And Frank, thank you very much. I'm
happy to
hobbling around everywhere.
I'm happy to do it.
He went above and beyond, what I thought he was just coming to take some shots to the cars. So I really, really appreciate your support and, that piece you guys did for us.
Holler at me anytime. Thank you so much for that.
We have
all right, that's all I wanted.
we are, I think, 9 o'clock is our
9 o'clock is our end time, but I do want to try to get these two questions from Roberta and then from Daryl McNair, if we could.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Hi, everyone. This is Roberta Duarte, the Latina ally that I just sent a message. Great conversation. I've heard a bunch through COVID since we got it, online, and I'm really enjoying this. So, as an ally, I'm trying to listen, learn, and also reflect and see what I can learn to bring back also to the Brown community, because there's some struggles, right? They're very similar, and I want to make sure that we're also supporting. So something that I'm here often in Cleveland, because I'm from Paraguay, is that there's a need for a strong leadership development and succession process, right? We talked a lot about really great things, but at times it's like, okay, we're in these positions of power. What's next? Who's coming next? Is it another white person? Is it someone that is not on the same page? So what are we doing, or what are you guys doing to build that pipeline? Because we need representation, we need engagement, and we at times also need to train our new strong blood, right, brothers and sisters, like even here, graduating from college. Like, what are we doing to build that pipeline? Thank you.
Can I answer that? I don't want to jump over anybody, but what I will say is I am a Cleveland native. I'm born and raised here. And growing up, I was surrounded by great businessmen, great nonprofit leaders, like Mr. Hall, my father's being one of them, even Randall McShepard, all these people were part of my village growing up. And what I would say is from the moment I stepped out of college, they have embraced me. I would go sit with them for job interviews. Even if they weren't giving me a job, they were telling me what I need to do. Until this point, I have never been let down by those men. They've told me things sometimes I didn't want to hear, and told me some ways that I should be a little bit different. But I would say that maybe previously in the previous generation that aren't millennials, that was a major issue. And we've had some discussion about that in the city of Cleveland, at the city club and things of that nature. But right now in this moment, and I think in this instant where the entire Black community is putting their arms around young Black sisters and Black brothers, that we are working on that succession plan. And I know I've recently joined the NAACP. I was put on the Urban League Guild board, and now I'm working with Marshall Maccabee, and they are as much feeding into me as they can. So I would say that as a young millennial, I feel it. And my hope and my aim is to continue that to the next generation, making sure they still have those same bridges.
Love it. Love it. Thomas, are you with us? Are we able to unmute you there? If not, Anthony, are you able to hear me? We want to squeeze your questions in there. Anthony, there you are. Are you still there? All right, Thomas. Anthony. Daryl.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
I got you. Who am I talking to?
Daryl McNair.
Daryl, what's going on?
All right, how's everyone? Good conversation. I do, however, have a question. I had an interesting conversation with a white gentleman tonight, and we were talking about the situation. As you know, most white folks are a little bit, skittish, concerned, confused as it relates to what's going on. So it's helpful when they do reach out and ask the question. And we sort of paralleled today to 1968, and Brian sort of alluded to it earlier. And my question is, we have a problem. Everybody acknowledges it's a global problem, but will the problem be solved at the local level or at the national level? And who will lead that charge in solving the problem? I heard a lot of folks tonight talk about, I'm happy to support this, I'm happy to support that. But the reality of it is there needs to be a galvanizing voice or few voices that folks can get around in order to move this agenda forward, in my opinion. Okay, in 68, what progress was made back then was you had the Martin Luther Kings, you had the Malcolm X's, you had, you even had folks like John F. Kennedy and Robert who were supportive at the level and whatnot. So I'm asking the question. Again, I don't think it's an easy answer, but there has to be a galvanized voice and not a fragmented voice if we really are going to sustain change and not let this momentum movement that's there become a flavor of the month.
The terrible commonality among those individuals is how we lost each of them.
Exactly.
And I'm seeing you nodding your head yes there, Brian.
Yeah, I was nodding my head yes. And hey, Daryl, good evening. I think we're in a different time and place. I use a good example and one that's not so good. I bet no one could, well, a few people, but you can't name a single leader of Black Lives Matter. And they've been very impactful. And I think that is a model we're uncomfortable with because we grew up in a generation where that didn't work. You needed a spokesperson. I'm working on it with another group to try to get a panel. We were like, let's get, the leader of Black Lives Matter. And we got 3 different names. So to your point, Frank, and is a bit morbid, but they don't know who to pick off because the movement is a lot of places. And then the bad example of that, unfortunately, is the terrorists. I mean, they figured out a way to create cells and have similar messages in all those cells, but one cell didn't know the other cell. They all knew what the message was. They did have a leader, and he's no longer with us, at least that leader. So, I hate to use that as an example, but I think there is the ability, and that was my point earlier about we get stuck in that struggle, unfortunately. And maybe, someone said, well, who's the leaders in Cleveland? Who is the leader? And I think it's a lot of people. I think there are a lot of leaders.
You feel encouraged by that?
I do. I absolutely do. I think there's younger. I'm impressed all the women who are leading, Black women who are leading nationally and in local cities. You mentioned Danielle earlier at the NAACP. I think we need a lot of leaders. We do need an agenda. Kevin said it well, that people are working towards. So Daryl, that would be my answer. I know we want to galvanize around a person. I think we can galvanize around a cause. And I think Black Lives Matter is a perfect example of galvanizing around a cause. Heck, there's a street in front of the White House now named Black Lives Matter Plaza.
And that's a beautiful thing. And I guess my thing is, we're talking about institutionalized, something that's been institutionalized for years, and it's going to require policy change. And that's where I talk about from a leadership standpoint, because I do agree with you, times have changed, and Black Lives Matters is a perfect example of what will drive change. But there has to be the next level of where this new policy becomes institutionalized to really implement that change.
Mr. McNair, I'm gonna let you go, Frank, but all I'll say is that I'm gonna use a reference that I don't know how many of you guys seen the movie Drumline, but in the movie Drumline, they say something really important. I said it: one band, one sound. Now you got all those different section leaders, you got a drum major, but it's one band, one sound. If we can get that going, you know, Mr. McNair, I know your background, so I know you're trying to get a meeting with somebody. You call directly to that person. You have somebody else call that person. Do you have a third person call that person? That is, I think, the model that we need to keep moving towards. And that will get us systemic changes because we'll be able to, again, influence the people that can actually make those changes from every direction. That's what I think is going to actually push us forward.
Nick Cannon made an appearance in this conversation with
He's everywhere, isn't he? He's everywhere.
Nick Cannon into this. Arian Kirkpatrick says that this really spoke to her. Great example this evening by the folks participating in this panel. And Erica, I don't want to be remiss and not mention how folks can donate to the President's Council. Could you share that with people really fast?
Absolutely, my pleasure. You can directly on my cell phone, 216-905-9729, or you can visit the President's Council website at thepresidentscouncil.com. You can contact any one of my board members, including Brian Hall, who's on our panel today. And I also want to give a sincere welcome and encouragement to each of you who have participated in this conversation today to reach out to the President's Council and let us know what we can do to help and support you. That is our purpose, that is our passion, that is our mission. We want to know directly from you how we can serve you. That is our goal. I also want to thank each of you who have spoken and shared your voice in a real way tonight on this panel. I really appreciate you taking the challenge and being vulnerable tonight. So I appreciate that. And I also want to say to Frank Wiley, you have been an advocate and a partner with me and with the President's Council in making certain that as an unapologetic African-American advocacy organization, that our message is carried on the airwaves, that our message is carried to others in other cities, in other counties, and that it's not filtered with fluff. And so I just want to thank you. The media plays an extremely important part in this. So thank you for having the courage to work side by side with us.
I can't thank you all enough for allowing me to participate in this process. And I would love to stay in touch with each of you as we move forward because Erica, you know, I'm just a call away. Whatever I can do to help try and put the word out there for the President's Council, I am definitely there. And I would like to work with you, Kevin. I'd like to work with you as well, Brian. And Colin, you know, we had discussed some ideas, so I'd like to definitely follow up on that. And Evan, I'd like to follow the journey. I would really like to follow the journey. And I'd like to give each of you one quick final thought about this whole process, this conversation. Colin, I'll start with you.
Oh, man. I guess the most important things here are Black Lives Matter, Black policy matters, and Black dollars and Black influence matters. And we can do all those things. We'll have a better future.
Ryan.
We launched the President's Council in 1996. I'm proud that we are both still here. We have a great executive director. And on this panel, we have an example of one of our scholars that we helped through high school. He's now graduated college, and here he is trying to work and put a part of the movement together. So it's great to see that in this panel, live and kicking. So it's my comment.
Erica, anything you'd like to add?
I guess to the point that everyone is making in terms of economic empowerment, make certain that you use the President's Council as that pipeline to promote your business, to do business with each other. We are Northeast Ohio's only African-American business chamber. If you are not a member of this business chamber, you need to be. We make strategic connections. We connect with suppliers through the GCP marketplace. We have many associate members, including the Cavs, who are buyers of those in our chamber. So please, if you are not a member of the President's Council,
you need to become a member so that we can empower ourselves to do business with each other.
Right on, Erica.
Evan, is there anything you'd like to add?
I'd like to say that this conversation has been very insightful, and I appreciate Erica for inviting me to be a part of this. Moving forward, I will take all of these points and going forward into these next weeks of planning this protest and just moving forward with trying to promote this movement. I'm going to take everything that I learned tonight and definitely utilize it. And I hope that we all can be in touch moving forward.
Absolutely. And Kevin?
Yeah. So Frank, first, thank you for facilitating this conversation. Erica and Brian, thank you for inviting the Cavs to be a part of this. And Colin and Evan, look forward to working with you. And I'm just going to end it quite honestly on what Evan said. I mean, what Colin said. Powerful. One band, one sound. I see that as one city, one sound.
That's all right. And I want to leave us with some words from the late, great Dr. King. He said, "We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. Procrastination is still the thief of time. Life often leaves us standing bare, naked, and dejected with a lost opportunity. This may well be mankind's last chance to choose between chaos or community."
Amen.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Frank.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you. Have a good one, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.